Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let me say that it's a true pleasure to be with you here today, this morning, at the Warsaw Stock Exchange. I would like to thank very much Mr. Adam Jased and Mr. Marcin Zabadowski from TVP World for inviting me here and for giving me the chance to share some thoughts with you. And actually, many of the thoughts are connected to the thoughts that have been just presented by Mr. Jakub Jagodowski, Polish Minister of State Assets. So as you see, there are certain ideas that resonate not only within the Polish government, but also within the Polish financial supervision. So I'm happy to follow up on certain ideas that have been touched upon, and I also present our perspective on the current trends and the current situation as far as capital markets in CEE and in Poland are concerned. I won't start by quoting the Nobel Prize winner, but I'll touch upon the outcomes of the research later on. But let me start by quoting the obvious before moving to more difficult topics. It's beyond any doubt that Poland is the growth champion, is the European growth champion. And Poland's economic rise over the past decades it's truly impressive also for other countries and observers of the markets. And just to give you an example, in 1991, Poland's GDP per capita was 2.5 times lower than those of Greece and Portugal. Yet in recent years, we have surpassed both of the countries. And even though we are not as rich as Germany, France, or the UK yet, we are approaching the level of Spain. And one thing that I would like to stress very strongly here, that Poland's EU accession has been one of the key factors allowing for these levels of growth. And in our discussions regarding the current debate on certain European strategies or policies, including those related to the capital markets, this factor has to be borne in mind, that without the EU accession, Poland's growth rate would have been significantly lower than the one that we have benefited from over the past decades. And one of the factors of Poland's economic success is, of course, also the institutional base, and that's the point where I'd also like to refer to the outcome of the research of this year's Nobel Prize winners, showing the relevance and the significance of a proper institutional framework. And we believe that Polish financial supervision has been a vital part of this institutional framework, allowing for a stable and safe development of the Polish financial market, which was also a condition necessary to the overall development of the economy. Of course, not the only condition, but one of the conditions that had to be met in order to allow for such an impressive development of the Polish economy. And that's one of the reasons why we also believe that, given that the Polish financial system has proven to be a stable base for a development of the country's economy, we should be very careful and prudent in advocating radical changes to the current setup of the Polish financial market. Of course, we see certain features of the Polish financial market being, let's say, for example, the quite heavy reliance of the economy on banking financing. But we have to be also proud of the heritage that we've been able to build over the past 30 years, which means that we have to embrace new chances, we have to follow new trends, but we have to be prudent in advocating radical changes to the current structure of the financial market, because we have to make sure that we do not lose what we have built over the last decades, including the robust and stable and very innovative banking sector. And I'm looking at Tomasz Baladziłowski, head of the Polish Stock Exchange. Of course, we understand the need to supplement or to amend or to refine the mix of financing for the economy by increasing the role of the capital markets. But we also have to keep in mind that the role and the stability and the operation of the banking sector was one of the key factors that contributed to the stable and robust development of the Polish economy over the last years. And of course, we see that the need to develop capital markets as an important segment of funding for the innovative economy. And on this point, I would also like to say that our observations in this field are vastly in line with the diagnosis that has been provided by Enrico Letta and Mario Draghi in the recent report submitted to the European Commission. We very much agree with many of the findings, with many of the conclusions of this report. In particular, we share the view that European capital markets deserve more attention and that they may deserve some redefined approach that also could lead to a potential redefinition of the strong reliance of certain economies on bank financing. As for now, in my today's speech, I leave aside certain institutional proposals which, in my opinion, maybe do not directly respond to the major, let's say, deficiencies or to the major inhibitors of the growth of the European capital markets. Instead, let me touch on certain areas and on certain aspects that have been identified at European level and that I believe to be also relevant for the CEE region and in particular for Poland. And let me mention a couple of them in my remarks today. So the first question, of course, is the question how to attract capital, because capital markets, as the name itself says, is about capital, and without significant interest from capital donors, let's say, there won't be we won't have developed capital markets. And according to our data, and it's also connected to what Minister Jawadowski said in his speech a couple of minutes before, we see that there is a significant preference of households for bank deposits, and actually real estate is quite frequently considered the only viable alternative for households to bank deposit savings. And this is something that we need to approach and change. We need to together we need to reflect upon the question how to rechannel, how to direct the households' funds from bank accounts and probably also from real estate market into capital markets to make them work for the economy. And it's quite an obvious saying, but we have been talking about this a lot, but also a lot has been made, and I'm referring to the Polish PPK program, which is the stock market-based retirement program that has been implemented a couple of years ago here in Poland. And we believe this is a step in the right direction, and you should think how to scale up ideas that are based on the concept of the PPK to achieve a higher level of long-term capital market savings from the general population, not only for the retirement purposes, but also more generally in terms of long-term saving, long-term investment. What are the potential, let's say, tools how we can achieve this factor? Of course, one key factor is financial education, which is also connected strongly to the demographic situation. As much as it does not sound optimistic for people of my generation, we have to take into account that the substitution rate at the days when we go into retirement will be significantly lower than the one we've seen for the current generations. And this should lead to a reflection. We should be looking for long-term savings alternatives other than only bank deposits and real estate. We should also be asking the market for opportunities to invest in the capital markets, and we should be willing to rechannel, to direct our capital to these instruments. In more technical terms, I believe that the development of UCITS-compliant ETF exchange-traded funds may also be a factor that will contribute to the wider interest of the general public in stock exchange investment, because this can prove to be a viable alternative for direct stock participation. If we provide customers with a simple, transparent product that is compliant with all the European standards, as I'm mentioning UCITS, that will allow the general public to this or another way participate in the stock exchange market, then we may provide them also with an alternative vis-a-vis bank deposits. And of course, the question that's also open and on the table is, do we want to talk about tax incentives that will somehow stimulate the development of long-term investment for the general public? That could be also a potentially useful tool to further stimulate the interest in capital market savings, and potentially also decrease the differences in the treatment between real estate investments and investment in the capital market, because what we see now in the market, and most of us are aware of it, there's a significant difference in treatment of investments in real estate versus investment in the capital market instruments. Ultimately, what the investors are looking at is, of course, a reasonable level of return, and this is probably also an area where we still have some homework to do. Because if we compare Polish blue chips versus, for example, American blue chips, then we see that the level of returns offered by these two types of investment are significantly different. So just to compare, investment in WIG20 index over the last 10 years, someone who had invested in WIG20 would have gained about 7% over the last 10 years, while parallel products based on American S&P 500 index would have given a gain of over 175%. So it's 10 versus 175, which also shows that it will be quite difficult for us to overcome, let's say, the low level of interest in capital market investment if we don't provide the investor base with a significant or with sufficient level of quality issuers. So that brings me to the second question. The first was how to attract capital. The second is how to attract quality issuers. Because we've seen that the Polish IPO market, even though 2024 marks a year of recovery after previous years, we should also keep in mind that this recovery is, especially if you look at the figures, if you look at the volume, it's quite significantly driven by one IPO that has been conducted by a company who runs its business in Poland, but actually has had its prospectus approved in Luxembourg. And this brings me also to the conclusion that we should think, and that's part of the homework that we are doing now, and we are in touch with the stock exchange. We are also in dialogue with the Polish investment firms community, how to amend, how to reasonably enhance our, for example, prospectus approval procedures to make all these issuers be willing to access the Polish market based on our approved prospectus within the Polish regulatory channel, because we believe there is significant benefit also for the investor protection, for the transparency of the market, for issuers to access the Warsaw Stock Exchange also via the Polish regulator. And I can promise, and I hope that we'll be able to deliver on this, that we are also working internally with my colleagues at the PFSA, how to amend our procedures and what to do in order to make this route to access the Polish market based on the Polish approved prospectus faster and more efficient. And this question, how to attract issuers, it also goes back to one of the topics mentioned by Mr. Jawodzowski about deregulation. Because we see and we endorse the European level initiatives aimed at lowering the cost of compliance for issuers, especially SME issuers. And I'm fully in line, and I fully agree with the statement that deregulation has to go in line with the rebuild or with the building of trust between public and private institutions. And that's also something that echoes very strongly in our discussions with the market participants. That both, in order to be able to deregulate, in order to be able to safely and reasonably deregulate, we have to build on the trust that we can establish between the market participants and the public authorities. Without the trust, it's not possible to deregulate in a safe manner. So I fully agree that deregulation is key, or even maybe not deregulation, but simplification of regulation, call it this way. But in order to be able to have it and to get rid of overly detailed, overly prescriptive regulations, we need to build the trust. Without having the trust between the participants, it can be very difficult to loosen the strict rules. So that was the second part, how to attract issuers. Another key areas that we believe to be important is the development of private market, including VC and PE. We see that the Polish and CE private market has developed significantly over years, but it still hasn't reached the stage that will match, that will correspond to our ambitions and the needs of the Polish economy. So we believe that this is an area that we should focus at, and we are also involved at the work that is aimed at bolstering the Polish VC and PE environment. And finally, let me come to the idea that is the overarching idea of the pan-European discussions on capital markets these days, which is the further integration of the markets. And as I said, I won't delve into the matters that appear controversial. First of all, the infrastructure of the market supervision. Let's leave it for another discussion. But of course, it is true that it's crucial to overcome the fragmentation to be able to build a regional market. So that goes without saying. But what we believe is a bit underrated and maybe not fully taken care of as of today is the convergence and integration of market practices around Europe. So we believe that's an area where European supervisory agencies, including the ESMA, which is responsible for the capital market, has a very significant role to play to ensure convergence, maybe not of regulations, not of laws, not of mandatory statutory provisions, but to ensure convergence of approach of regulators and supervisors to make sure that there is no race to the bottom in terms of regulatory requirements, but on the other hand, that there is also a level playing field for all the participants across Europe. So I will stop here at this moment. I would like to thank you very much for this attention. Of course, as we all are aware, these were only a couple of thoughts that were connected to the most important initiatives that are discussed in the public debate about capital markets in Europe right now. I want you to remain assured that the Polish financial supervision, but also me personally, we want to stay directly involved in the pan-European debate around capital markets. And we are willing to support all the actions, all the strategies, all the policies that will support the development of the European capital markets and the Polish capital market as well. So thank you very much, and I wish you inspiring discussions in the panels to come. Thank you.